Jane, help me remember to record.
Yeah.
We're recording. You're in progress. I'm not doing any signature stuff, you know, like those forms. So hopefully you're okay being recorded. Welcome, everyone, to Think Again, Faith Again. So good to see somebody. I wasn't sure if we'd have anybody because it's in the middle of summer and so many people are gone in various places. So I'm very grateful that you've all come here and on Zoom. Grateful to Keith being willing to come. He's been traveling a lot. Just got back in town a few days ago. So Doug Christensen, who often attends, is the one that recommended Keith. You two know each other at least somewhat. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Keith comes highly recommended from Doug, so we can all pile on Doug for some reason. That's right. Lisa, where are you, Lisa? Okay, well, I'll turn this around. So this is Lisa Cannon's beautiful little Danish church called Bell Hall. It's a lovely place and so grateful to her for sharing it with us tonight. And thank you, Jameis, for that beautiful interlude music. Right. Jameis is great to do that. Jameis is going to probably have to cut out a little early. He's got a gig to play out with his son, with the chocolatier people in the avenues. What are their names? Jameis? The people that are going. Yeah, Hatch's family child. So he's got to go up there and play with his son in the avenues there. Thank you to my wife for manning the Zoom conversation. Hopefully it'll work and hopefully we can hear your comments and stuff. It's a miracle when it works. Oh, yeah. Some of you have traveled quite a way. Curtis, it's probably about an hour drive and you guys about close to an hour. So thank you for taking the time and welcome to new people that haven't been here before. Appreciate you coming and I hope you'll come again. Walter, you've come along too. From the northern country, Eastern Northern. Oh, good. Let's see. We got kind of too many people tonight to go around and do what you're passionate about. I'll take maybe three though. Somebody wants to share something you're passionate about right now in your lives. Yes.
I am very excited about this topic because I am going to be sharing some content for Women for Ethical Government on media literacy.
Excellent. Tell us your name again, so everybody.
Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia. Excellent. Take another one. Something you're passionate about. On your mind? Suzanne.
Fresh tomatoes.
You only have fresh tomatoes? I barely have blossoms yet.
My brother has. Fresh.
Really? Nice. That's something to be excited about. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else want to share? Yes, okay.
Walter and I are
Lynn, sorry.
Walter and I are passionate about whitewater kayaking.
Have you been doing it?
We've been doing.
Nice.
Yes,
I gotta get up there with you guys to do that. You doing the Weaver or what are you doing?
Weaver, the Bear River, the Snake River.
Wow. You guys are getting around. Good for you. Anything else? What do you want to share? Yeah.
I'm passionate about news media and passionate about change, I guess. I am passionate. Wow.
You can always count on it, right? The change. It's good. Excellent. Somebody else that I said? Yes.
I'm passionate about being in the moment, and the moment right now has opened up this lovely window.
It is gorgeous.
Exquisite window.
It is very, very beautiful. Thank you, Charlotte. That's Charlene. Yes. Tell me your name.
I'm Diane.
Yes. With Rick. Yes.
I think I'm passionate about very hard. For example, I get emotions that I see very much more. France, I mentioned things like she had a baby in March, and it's just now.
That's hard.
It's sweet, but
she was there. And
Yeah,
I didn't realize how lasting some things that we do, certain generations.
so true. Thank you.
Very lucky.
Thanks. So again, you can, hopefully you already went online and read Keith's bio. He might mention briefly what he does, besides what quotes out. So just notice that. So thank you. Anyway, and then there's materials online that, you can research about this topic, things to listen to, watch, or read. And you're always welcome back, and I'll turn the time over to you.
Right. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for the invitation. And I thought I would maybe start with just a little bit of personal background, maybe some things that aren't the official bio, but then maybe ways they can connect. And but then I think mostly what we want to do is just talk about what you want to talk about and figure things out. So, but I will start with my my one interesting connection to your group. So for the last 10 years, I've been an employee at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the church history department, and trying to speak to a Latter-day Saint audience. And one of those projects was a book called Real versus Rumor. But when I submitted the first draft to Deseret Book, the title was Think Again. And so
Somebody named Ed Grant, I think.
so there's our link. And this was funny. They actually said, nobody wants to read a book about thinking. And I said, but that's the problem. We need to read books about thinking. We need to think better. And so it turned into kind of like a little trap. The headline, the title is about rumors and myths, but what the book is really about is how to think. And so, but anyway, so Think Again was my working title for all the months I was writing it, and then the marketing people changed it at the end. But you never control the title. That's always the marketing people who win in those debates. But yeah, maybe I'll just start. Well, maybe I'll stay with what I am doing now, and then go back a little bit bigger. So, 10 years ago, I became the director of the church history library, just the building right over here. There's also 24 places around the world where we store records, and so my principal task and my staff, about 75 employees and 200 volunteers, is record keeping, and so it was keeping the records of the church itself. So these are not genealogy records. That's a different group, Family Search. And our task is the records of what the church itself does. So when they build a building or a temple, we would hold the the architectural records, or meeting minutes, or the Joseph Smith's journal, those kind of things, that the history of the church itself. And I did that for 7 years, and then 3 years ago they gave me a new assignment to work in more of an outreach role and partnerships. And that's where I met Doug. I I've been coordinating a program for the last probably 5 years, where we go out and talk to young adults, church members mostly, and we let them ask anything they want about church history, anything that's bothering them or something they don't understand. We've done more than 200 events all over the world. More than 20,000 people have come to sessions where two historians we'll talk all night long. Sometimes we'll stay until they don't have any more questions. We've been there 4 or 5 hours sometimes, just talking with people. And then that turned into, or added on to that, was an opportunity to teach the institute directors how to help answer questions. And so that was the context in which I met Doug. I've been doing those trainings in Europe and the US. I'll start in the Pacific later this fall. And so that's where I've been kind of in church in my employment side. But if I step But, misinformation, errors, disinformation, that's bigger than the church world. We're just drowning in that in the 21st century. It's in politics, it's in healthcare, it's in journalism. I mean, you open your phone and you encounter misinformation. That's just a functional skill we have to have in the 21st century, is how to know what do we do. But so my career started in the auto industry. I grew up outside of Baltimore, started working in a manufacturing firm and kind of went through the ranks there. I have an MBA, and there was a certain point, the story's mostly long and irrelevant, but where I just got bored and wanted to do something meaningful, and then went back and got a PhD in history at Indiana University. And then I've spent probably 20 years in higher ed doing, well, we call it public history. So it's less of a field of, I'm going to go be the expert in George Washington and all of the sources. And it's more about studying the audience, the public. What do they do? How do they interact with history when they come to a monument, for example? So my dissertation was about commemorating Abraham Lincoln and the way people in the 20th century interacted with his memory. I did a book in Texas. So I was a history professor at the University of Texas and an administrator at University of Texas, El Paso. And so way back in the olden days of 2008, the state of Texas was redoing their social studies curriculum, and it exploded into a huge war. And they wanted to remove all women and people of color from the standards. And it was this interesting, in the media, it was framed as a political war of Republicans versus Democrats, because that's the narrative journalists like to use. But what was really at stake is what was really at stake now. It was an internal fight among Republicans, and it's because it's Texas, right? And so there were 10 Republicans on the board and 5 Democrats, 15-member board, who needed a simple majority. And so they had 6 of these. Today we would call them, MAGA Republicans. They didn't have that name in 2008, but they were calling themselves, true conservatives, or but they were the Tea Party was a name that some of them were using, but they were working across the whole curriculum. They were trying to change sex ed to be abstinence only. They were working in history. They were working in math. They were trying to depoliticize math. But what they were trying to do was element science. Really strong effort to put creationism into the texts. But that was really the dynamic that was at stake. There were 6 of these new social, they're not fiscal conservatives, they're not the traditional conservatives, they're these new social, motivated by social issues, abortion and culture war issues. There's 6 of those and 4 of the older Republicans. And so that was really the power dynamic. And the 6 would put public pressure on the 4 and say, oh, you're going to vote with the Democrats, to beat them into submission. So we really had 6 people dictating the 15-member board and using the bigger culture war narrative to leverage their influence. And so I was writing about that in 2010, 11, and 12. I feel both vindicated and super depressed that is now that little battle on the Texas school board has become the battle in American politics right now, or the last 8 years. So I have been interested in, public history. You're interested in politics because that's what's shaping people. And so, yeah, now we'll come back to when I came to work for the church after doing those kinds of things. And I direct the library, so I have a front door on downtown Salt Lake City that's open every day, public hours. People can walk in, and the people just walked in with the dumbest stuff. Just crazy ideas, stupid ideas. And that was really kind of the trigger for me to write Real versus Rumor, was to say, if we could just we knew how to think about stuff, we would save all kinds of problems. And some of these problems were like generational, false stories, myths that they had been telling through their family that had shaped the way they saw themselves, usually as being better than other people, shaped the way they ran their family traditions. I'll give you one brief example. It's one family, they had a copy of the Book of Mormon. It was an old book, and the first probably 30 pages were torn out, including the title page. So it just picks up, 35, 40 pages in. But then inside the front cover, it had a little note saying that Joseph Smith, the church founder, had given this book to their ancestor, their kind of first member of the church in their family. And so, and then it had a signature. So they brought it in and they said, look, that Joseph Smith gave this to our ancestor, he signed it. And so I look at it and I said, well, it doesn't really look like his signature. But they insisted on it. It went way back in their family. They had built all kinds of traditions around it, almost granting this book a kind of a metaphysical power. Men, as early as the 1930s, men would take it with them when they would propose marriage, as if it were some kind of talisman to make the woman agree. They had, when members of their family would go and serve full-time missions for the church, they would go and see the book, like this pilgrimage, and touch the book as a way to connect with Joseph Smith and their family and the truth. And so they built up all kinds of things. And this ancestor had grown up. He ended up with 7 plural wives. So there's like hundreds of these people all over the West. And anyway, yeah, so, well, yeah, I don't know. I'll spare you the details, but the end result is it was the book was published in England in 1849, which is 5 years after Joseph was murdered. So there's no way, unless time travel is part of the equation, there's no way Joseph signed a book published in 1849, printed in 1849. And so, they just dismantled their whole everything, right? And so part of me is laughing at them, and I'm telling the story in a little funny way, but part of me is also, like really sad. I mean, they've built a family identity, they've built traditions, they've built kind of a worldview, and that's for me where the real problem with misinformation is. I mean, yeah, I can con you, I can scam you out of some money, whatever. I might go to jail, you might recover. But when it gets into the space of my identity and my family and my people, my culture, my tradition, when we elevate it there, then challenging it touches so many other parts of them. You'll be mad if I con you out of your money, but you'll get over it. But if I topple your whole family identity and worldview, you may never recover. And so that's kind of what's really at stake, I think, when we're dealing with truth and error and good information. And that's why, to answer your question, that's why I've become really passionate about accurate information and information literacy as really a vital skill for the 21st century. So maybe that's a good stopping place. I don't know. I can tell more stories or whatever, but what should we do? This is your gathering. How can I help?
What are some of the rumors that you think are really affect a lot of people?
Rumors that affect people. I think it's maybe I'll make it more about a relationship. When the rumor becomes integral to your identity, and it doesn't matter what it is, then it becomes really that's the challenge. So it's less about the facts. It's really less about the information and more about how I've integrated it in. So let me give you another example. A few years ago, a local TV station wanted to do a little show about a book in our collection that was donated in 1989, had handwriting in it and a signature alleged to be Elvis Presley. So it's signed E.A. Presley. It's got things written in it like, I believe this, I want more, I need more. My daughter needs this, like all these kind of things. And so for 30 years, people assumed that was the book. I got assigned to be the person to go on the show and talk about the book. I'd never looked at it. It wasn't a thing, but so they were going to film on Friday, was going to air the next day, which was the first weekend of October in 2018. So that was a Saturday between two sessions of the church's general conference was what this was going to be. And so I didn't get to it till Monday afternoon. I opened it up and I look at it for about 20 minutes and it just didn't add up. And so I go to my bosses, they're all named Elder, and I say, I don't think we should do this. I've looked at it for 20 minutes. I can't prove it yet, but I think it's fake. And so they trusted me. We contacted the TV station, and I swear they thought about it for like 3 seconds. And they said, well, can we come and film the book without Keith? I said, no, that's not how it works. And so it started the process then of authentication, and the end result was it's very clearly a forgery. And I published those results in BYU Studies, and there was I think one of the links was to a LDS Living version of that. But to get to kind of the meat of your question, most of us will hear this and just think like, well, that's a silly thing, Elvis Presley. But after it was published, I was inundated with emails, online comments, in-person visitors to the library of people who were really, really upset with this. And we actually published the finding in the church news because we wanted to be able to give it, a little bit more, because my name's not Elder, but a little bit more weight into the findings. But there were two flavors of it, which maybe just kind of illustrate the ways that people do this. One was people who said, and these were people who were older, so the book is donated in 1989. And so these were people who heard firesides as teenagers in the 1990s. And so now they might be in their late 40s, early 50s, and they were coming in, or they were the speaker at those firesides telling that story. And they were saying that story was a crucial part of me gaining my witness, my testimony of the church. And it was tied into this moment of growing up and faith formation and the story they heard. And so that was a challenge because of the timing when they had heard the story and what they had done with it. The other one that totally surprised, and I kind of anticipated those, the one that totally surprised me were Latter-day Saints in the music industry. And for them, they would say in summary, it is hard to be a religious person in showbiz. We get mocked all the time, we get criticized for not drinking, for not doing things. And we relied on this story to tell people, basically, if Elvis thinks we're okay, then we're okay. And so they were using this story as a way to say to all of their colleagues in showbiz, hey, we know we're a little bit weird, but Elvis thinks we're okay, so let us be here. And so I won't share names, but you have heard the songs of some of these singers, their work, and for them it was this, again, it's the larger question, is their professional identity, and it's how their personal religious life intersects with their professional identity, and how they've tried to, legitimate themselves in their profession, and that was what was a challenge for them. So I think that's what I would watch for. The stories, you may hear a story and think, well, that's really silly, but I would watch, how are they using the story? When do they tell it? Why do they tell it? What's the so what? When they tell the story, they expect you to say, oh, wow, I'm so glad you're a musician, or, oh, wow, you have such a strong testimony. The so what is mostly more important than whatever the story is. But there are dozens and dozens of stories that people attach to.
The line of the Texas.
Yeah, yeah.
What kinds of rumors or conspiracies or whatever entered into that one? Where you're,
Oh, in Texas?
where you're talking about a large segment of the public, the education system.
Sure.
the
Well,
message.
well, I mean, basically, so the state standards work in a weird way. They name things that must be taught, is the way it gets written. And so then the way that they, so somebody will propose to add something or propose to remove something, somebody will object. And then in our current kind of cultural war narrative, and I'll use this a lot, the cultural war is like a script. And this is the term I use in Real versus Rumor. When life is chaos and we don't know what to do, we try and grab on to something, a script to follow, and it's a cultural script. How do I know how to act in a situation? And so the cultural war is a script for us today, because when you don't know what to do, it tells you which team you're on, who the bad guys are, what you believe, how you should mobilize. Whenever an issue surfaces, it tells you which way do I change my profile picture? Am I standing with this one or standing against that one? And so the script helps you to make all those decisions. But it's the flaw in this script is that it's built on a really stark binary. There's only two. There's only two teams. It's a zero-sum game. Anything that I give up to the other team is a loss to my team. And so what this translated to in the curriculum was, if somebody said, well, I want to put in, well, let's see, she had already been listed in the script in the in the standards in the 1990s. Oprah Winfrey was named as a successful leader and business person and significant person in the 20th century. So these social conservatives, as they called themselves in 2008, they went through and removed every woman and every person of color who was named. And so Cesar Chavez is removed, Oprah Winfrey is removed, any person, they remove, in the Battle of the Alamo, they remove references to Mexicans who were part of the fight. And so then in the script, when one of the Democrats would object and say, you can't put, we don't want you to remove Cesar Chavez, it has to be there. Well, then the Republican compromise would be, well, then we have to put someone else in. And so what they put in, the way the battle worked, there was another battle about Christmas. And so Christmas had been, and it's complicated, and it's political. But anyway, one of the battles was taking Christmas and Christ out. And so they said, well, we put Cesar Chavez in, and Christmas has to go in. But this becomes just a totally stupid, this is not the way you design education, by making a list of how many people can we agree on. And because by the end of the day, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And teachers don't have time to teach what's already on the test, and we're adding all these things. And it wasn't even about education and learning. It was about who puts what on. But the script dictated that you always had to add two. And then they would go out and they'd say, oh yes, the process worked. We found a great compromise. Well, that's a stupid way. So that's a distraction. The whole thing was a distraction because nobody's talking about education. They're talking about my team wants this person, your team wants that person. How do we go there? And nobody said, is giving kids a list of 200 names a good way to teach them? That's the question that there was never any room to ask. And even when journalists would interview me, I'd try and pivot. They would want to ask, well, do you think Cesar Chavez should be in there? And I would say, I think we need to talk about education. And then they'd write the news article and they'd say, Texas University professor thinks Cesar Chavez should be in there, of course, because he's a liberal professor from the university. And it was just a totally politicized, and it missed. I mean, that's one of the outcomes, and frankly, it's one of the purposes of misinformation. If I can distract you over here, then you're not paying attention to whatever I'm working on, and that's removing the regulations on my business. It's whatever, because I've got you distracted over here, worried about whatever What, and I can predict what you're gonna worry about because the script tells me. As soon as I drop Cesar Chavez into the public dialogue, you're gonna be gone for 3 months. Let's make it real. As soon as we say he's too old to be in the office, we're gonna talk about that forever. And we're not talking about anything real in terms of policy and but that's how the script works. And people like that. Politicians like that because it gets you out of their business. Journalists like that because it sells way more. No, just like Deseret Book saying to me, nobody wants to read a book called Think Again. The journalists would tell me nobody wants to read an article about educational policy and how to help children learn better. But I'll get 1 million clicks if it's Cesar Chavez versus Christmas. And so the journalists like it because it's meeting their needs. And so that's the big problem, is that misinformation serves needs. And we can't just imagine, oh, truth will win because truth is more important. Misinformation is serving people's agendas and needs and bottom line. And that's why it's still around.
So as a historian of the audience, is this new or has it been forever? So.
Oh yeah, we people have been distracting other people for forever. I mean, if we go back to religious tradition, Eve and the serpent, that's a distraction, that's a misinformation if we take that founding story. So yeah, this is really old. Europe, wartime propaganda, this is old stuff.
I'm curious about, I understand creating chaos, division, all of that, because it makes people hungry to come back and, in the late, 1890s, steam locomotives, thousands of them were antiquated, sitting around. And so at the turn of the century in movie houses, it was the train wreck. And they were just crashing these old trains, getting these great reels visually. And people could not avert their eyes from train wrecks, hence the saying, it's a train wreck. I've got a 92-year-old mother in St. George, very active LDS, has been a Trumper, diehard, blah, 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 all this. And we couldn't be more opposite in our views and politics and that. What I have been, I've got thousands of followers on Twitter, and I've turned into grumpy grandpa on Twitter, and I am like, you don't want to fight me. But some of the comments that will come back that are life-threatening, ugly, anti-democratic, all of this, it just blows my mind. But now anymore, I just sing them, just, it's easy to block those kind of people. And you don't know, they could be from 5 different foreign detractors.
Right.
But the other day I had my cute mom on the phone and she's kind of on the fence. And anyway, I brought up this project 2025. Well, how do we know that's even truthful, where it's coming from? And you've been reading this 800, 900 page diatribe, and because she's not seeing it on a certain news channel that got sued, hundreds of millions of dollars for lying. If she's not going to see it there, then it can't be truth. And I go deeper with some of the people that you run into that have the craziest conspiracies that they have found online. So immediately you go to, okay, Q, they heard it on Q, and people are so addicted to sitting in a dark room on a keyboard, and this is truth to them, what is coming across. And then, I don't know, how many are there, maybe 3 or 4 right-wing news stations that they're getting some of the craziest stuff. And then the good stuff that's out there never gets reported. And I have just been fascinated with this phenomenon that we have right now, that truly is almost like we're reverting to what Germany was in the 36 to 39. Why do people feel a need? I mean, I kind of think sometimes it's, they want to be in the know and, oh, I've got the goods, I've got the scoop with my neighbor
Yep.
about this wacky thing that I just heard. And I don't even know how to talk with people like that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a question of the hour. I forgot in my bio, I dropped one more thing. I taught a night class at the University of Utah a few years ago called Hoaxes in History. And we did a history of hoaxes and misinformation. And then for the final product, they had to go create an online hoax. And we let it run for 10 days. And then we came clean.
Started.
And it was a really great experience. We learned all kinds of things. But what we, in the conspiracy space, it's a little bit different kind of hoax, a little bit, the structure is different. And mainly, the difference is a conspiracy theory is a closed loop. And once you get in it, two things happen. It's really hard to get out of it, is one thing. And the second thing is researchers who study conspiracies and theories and people who believe them, once you believe one, you're more inclined to accept another and another. And so you end up with a whole bunch of them. And so the challenge becomes with a community that has some beliefs that look kind of like conspiracies. So in Latter-day Saint history and culture, there is in the Book of Mormon, there's a story about a group, the Gadianton robbers, that function like this secret group that will undermine a society. So that's a little piece already in the network. In modern church history, there is a revelation Joseph Smith receives about health, known as the Word of Wisdom, but it has a little passage about there will be conspiring people in the last days who will cause harm. These are part of a bigger, among Christianity. The Apostle Paul warns about spiritual wickedness in high places. And so we're already, as Christians and Latter-day Saints, kind of like on the border of conspiracy land, looking over.
To see that.
Yeah, and so there could be different motives that we're, and it could be we're thinking about last days, we're thinking about end times, but we're kind of, we don't, most Americans just kind of start a long way away. Christians, Latter-day Saints, evangelical Christians, we all start, like as a next door neighbor of conspiracies. And so then when we meet one, we're already a little bit open. And then you quickly get in that closed loop. And so conspiracies, one of the things that we often assume wrong, and if you've ever had one of these, you've had this conversation, you'll say, yep, I did this, and that you're right, it was wrong. We assume that giving them evidence, critical thinking will help them. It does, and this is that closed loop, because all the evidence you present becomes proof. Why are you trying so hard to cover it up? And that's the circular logic of it. I used to tease my students in Texas, and I would say, the most brilliant argument you can ever make is a conspiracy theory, because any evidence against it is automatically evidence for it. And so now you have millions of people generating your own evidence, because everyone who challenges you is now proof. And so trying to go at it from evidence-based, we got to end up in evidence-based reality, but the starting point never works, because
doesn't work either.
So here, the conspiracies are appealing to two things. They're not built on evidence, they're built on rhetorical appeals. One is to fear, and one is to kind of inside knowledge. And you mentioned both of those. Oh, I know a thing. Oh, yeah, look, watch my little YouTube video. I'll tell you something that nobody else knows. That insider knowledge, and then the fear, something bad is going to happen. They're going to get you. And both of those are emotional appeals. They're not evidence-based appeals. And so you've got to get into the space. So then you have to analyze, so what is prompting them to feel a need that those emotions are serving? And I don't know that the analysis, like oftentimes the analysis gets kind of condescending, like, oh, the people who believe in conspiracies are just illiterate, uneducated. But I think it's more it's probably more about things like things that are changing that they don't control, loss of feeling like you're not in control.
No voice.
So yeah, you don't have a voice, feeling left out, overlooked, and those, I think those emotions are part of what the conspiracy is meeting the needs. You're not left out because I'm here to give you the secret knowledge that, and so I think we have to kind of do the analysis that goes all the way up the stream to figure out, okay, so they feel left out. How do we make them not feel left out? Which becomes really hard when they're sending us aggressive texts and we're like, the last thing I want to do is invite you to the family dinner. But that's kind of what's going on. They're feeling.
And when people have to do this, they're different.
It's hard. It's
No, I mean, when you have to sit and talk with somebody, all of a sudden you realize this is a human being.
yeah.
And I'm not hiding behind a screen.
Yeah, and so I think I've read a lot of things that you shared some links about conspiracies. Most of them stay really high. My experience is you do have to kind of get down to the level of that person, who they are and what are they afraid of. And it comes through it's not evidence that answers it. It's going to be, I love you, you're my family member, you're my friend, we've been friends since high school, come on, you know me, you trust me. And then the other thing is it just takes a long time. And you got to unwind all kinds of, and for some of them years, it's years of thinking this way. So you have to teach them how to think about doing, you have to introduce evidence-based thinking. And so that takes a long time to learn. My wife was teasing me. She said, when I was working on Real versus Rumor, she said, no, wait a minute. I was telling her the whole concept. And she said, so let me get this straight. You think that people are kind of confused, and they don't think well enough, and they don't read enough, and so you're going to solve that by writing a book? So don't say it that way. But that's the reality. You don't read a book, you don't read an article, you don't get over it this afternoon. It is a reorienting of a worldview and thought processes, and it takes a long time.
And he just said,
Yeah.
It takes too long and it's too exhausting.
It is.
And it's
It
just
can be.
easier to say they're stupid.
Yeah. And it's easier to not stop inviting them to the
But
family dinner.
some of us are old enough. I mean, I remember, I'm older, I'm almost 80. And from the time I was little, we were told from the pulpit that Democrats were not worthy, that Democrats could not be true members of the church. And when the equal rights came out,
Yeah.
many of us were called downtown to protest. It was like holding back the ocean for us to say, what are you talking about? Pregnant women aren't going to be on the front. Because the church leaders said it. So you've hit it there. It's too exhausting. It takes too long.
Yeah.
I can't do it. No.
she's been a great protester for LGBT.
Okay, I have two questions. One, I think would be pretty easy. One,
Oh, let's do that one.
and then the other one, you can probably just say, I don't know. Okay.
Well, I'll go with something.
First one is, let's say you had this position in the 80s when the church received the salamander.
Oh, yeah.
The salamander letter.
Salamander. Yeah, so,
I mean, do you think
Do
about
I have-
what if I was there?
do I have all the knowledge that we have in 2024? Or do I only have what people had in 1984?
Yeah, I think it just, you had what was there in 1884.
Yeah, so, this is one of the, in my class on hoaxes, we spent a whole unit on Mark Hoffman. This is the best summary that I've ever heard of Mark Hoffman. He is the greatest forger who has ever been caught. And I like that for two reasons. One, it does establish something significant about him. In the 1980s, he was doing things that no other forger was doing. And forgery, like other crimes, is a cat and mouse game. The mice, the criminals get smarter, and the cats catch up, and then the mice get, and so it's always going back and forth. Forgers learn new things, law enforcement figures it out. In the 1980s, it was a moment where he was just way ahead of law enforcement. And in the 1980s, he deceived everyone. Historians, rare book dealers, the FBI, I mean, everybody, every discipline of knowledge that authenticated information, authenticated what he had. And so he was just that far ahead. So if I didn't know what we know now, I won't imagine that I'm somehow magical. I think I would have used the tools that people had in 1984, and those tools were just not adequate for what he was doing. You know, he had one of the documents at the time the bombs went off was under review at the Smithsonian. And for 1980s dollars, he was selling stuff to the church for $40,000, $50,000. This one was the first printed item it wasn't even the United States, but in what would become the United States, a printing press in the Massachusetts colony in the 1630s. The Oath of the Freeman was under review at the Smithsonian for 1.5 million. And so, and they had passed every one of their tests, but they just were trying to get up the courage to spend 1.5 million. And again, you know, Book of Commandments back then, today, Book of Commandments is selling for 2.3 million. Back then, they're selling for 40,000. So just where the market was, 1.5 million, it was enormous for a 1980s market. And they couldn't disprove what he had given them. They just couldn't hold up the courage to pay the price. And then the bombs went off and it all unraveled. And they were really, really grateful that they hadn't done that. But I think the other part of that saying that he's the greatest forger that's ever been caught helps remind me, and I thought about this all the time as library director, right? You know, it was like, what's coming in now? What are we gonna, and so the part about being that's ever been caught just keeps us humble to remember that there are now smarter mice out there. There are mice who've looked at Hoffman and now they've assimilated everything he knew. They've assimilated the way law enforcement responded, and someone will be better. And today, actually, so there's way more money in art forgery than document forgery, historic documents. So the greatest forgers in history were art forgers, because you could just make so much more money for art. But today, if you want to make, the forgers have different motives. You know, sometimes it's just they want to show off that they're smarter than the experts. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it is, you know, in Mark Hoffman's case, kind of causing chaos for a group. Or today, the easiest way to do that is online. That if that's your goal, you can do really cheap, easy things online to just mess up, cause chaos, and so yeah. So it just kind of depends where you are. But no, you know, I'll tell you one more funny story. When I became the director of the library, our rare book specialist, she said, you know, we should go around and meet all of the rare book dealers in Salt Lake that we buy stuff from. I said, great, I'd love to meet them. And so she set it all up, and I would go and meet with them, and we did half a dozen of them. So it's a local, and the first one we went to had this really weird experience. I thought that was so weird. And then it happened in every other one. And it was the experience. We'd be talking to them, you know, they're really old, they've been a rare book dealer forever. She was with me, you know, they're giving us the tour of the store, and yeah, we've sold the church this and that, we're a good partner, and we love our relationship, all that kind of stuff. And then at a certain point, their staff member would peel off my rare book specialist. So it'd just be me and the owner. And usually they'd get me in some like bookstores always have like some really awkward corner where you can't get out if you're in there. And so I'd be in there, I'd be face to face with the owner, and he would say to me, I just want you to know that every other dealer in Salt Lake City was deceived by Mark Hoffman except for us. We weren't. And I just said, no, you weren't. I know my history. Every person was deceived. There are actually only two. We do have two documented people from the 1980s in the moment, you know, before the bombs went off, who made significant critiques of Mark Hoffman. The first one was Elder Bruce R. McConkie, and it was when one of the items that surfaced was an alleged blessing from Joseph Smith to his son, Joseph Smith III, that was about succession in church leadership. Elder McConkie wrote a memo, an internal memo with 10, this is kind of interesting, 10 doctrinal reasons. There were 10 doctrinal errors in the text of that blessing, which he said Joseph Smith would have never taught these 10 things that contradict. And so that we have that. That's 1982, Bruce R. McConkie, with a detailed, systematic critique. The other one, oh, now why am I going to?
Was it Tanner's?
It was Gerald Tanner, and it was the Salamander letter. Salamander letter comes out.
Church.
Yeah, and they'd been running the Lighthouse Society by the 80s for 20 years, just pumping out everything negative they could find about the church. Salamander comes out, Gerald says, no, this doesn't feel right. He dedicated they did a monthly newsletter. He did a whole issue about why the Salamander letter didn't add up. You know, and he wasn't looking at the original. He was just saying, the whole thing doesn't add up. That issue, he said, he got all kinds of criticism. People are coming to him saying, what are you doing, man? For 20 years, you've been attacking this church. This is the gift. You should be running with it. And he says, no, I can't. It doesn't. And so he does then a second issue. And then it's a few months later that the bombs go off. So those are the only two. If you're not Gerald Tanner or Bruce McConkie, don't tell me that you were deceived in the 1980s, because everyone else was. But that was your first question, right? That was the fun one.
Okay, second one has to do with Joseph Smith and the practice of polygamy.
Oh, yeah.
You want to repeat the question?
The Joseph Smith, the practice of polygamy, and I'm assuming you're referring, we've had a rise in the last 10 or so years of polygamy denial among Latter-day Saints. Is that where you're going with this? Yeah, this is one that is just really fascinating to me as a, you know, kind of as a public historian and looking at how people interact with history. Because this was the original ecclesiastical question between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they fought this on pamphlet wars and missionary turf for a century. And it was in the 1970s when historians, and there was a new generation of historians and new historical methods, just put out all of the documentary evidence for polygamy. And it was just so overwhelming and compelling. The RLDS Church, after 100 years, said, yeah, you're right. This is too compelling. And so they stopped teaching that Joseph never practiced polygamy. They start writing about it in their own histories. They go through their own schism in the 1980s, where some of their version of kind of hardcore, extreme, conservative in their spectrum, who had emphasized their entire lives that Joseph never practiced plural marriage, they left the church because the church. But anyway, yeah, this was one that everybody thought was just totally clear and gone. And so this one originated, I mean, now the modern one originated probably the first, well, I mean, there's always been people saying stuff, but probably the first person to gain traction was Denver Snuffer. This was one of the things he taught. He was excommunicated a while ago, but it has picked up. And as we were talking about with conspiracy theories, this one, links on to a couple other ones, that polygamy is a conspiracy, that Brigham Young invented it, and they impose it back on Joseph Smith. They've lately added a second conspiracy that this was part of Brigham Young orchestrated the killing of Joseph Smith so they could take over. So it's now it's bad evidence, it's bad history. That's the easy answer about the polygamy part. But it's now built into a couple of these overlapping conspiracy theories, and I have to confess, I'm part of the conspiracy. One of the other layers of the conspiracy is that there are evil liberal historians employed by the church who have deceived church leaders and are putting this into church curriculum. That the beautiful part about that one, and they add one more, the Seer Stone and Book of Mormon translation is now kind of in this constellation of conspiracies that are linked to the denial. And so yeah, I mean, it's that's where we are. The evidence is just terrible. And basically the way the polygamy one works now is they'll invent a bunch of rules that sound nice, but then they just don't work in practice. And then they go applying these rules. So they're using, again, you kind of watch cat and mouse. They take methods of scholarship and they're going to say, we're going to look at primary sources, and we're only going to look at sources created by Joseph Smith. Well, Joseph doesn't create a lot of sources. He's not a handwriter. There are very few things in his handwriting. He dictates things to scribes all the time, letters. He speaks all the time. He never writes a text of his talk. People in the audience write notes. The acquisition we got from Community of Christ a few months ago included 7 handwritten letters from Joseph to Emma that she kept because he didn't write a lot. So, but if I stand up and make a rule and I sound scholarly and say, I demand only first-person evidence from Joseph Smith, well, in practice, you just don't have it. But we have first-person evidence from Heber C. Kimball, who learns from Joseph, who practices it, who writes in his journal. We have it from William Clayton. We have records in Nauvoo in the 1840s. All the normal standards of evidence we have, not as much as we want, but we have evidence that plural marriage is being practiced in Nauvoo by Joseph, by others, by people who are teaching, that he's teaching. But anyway, that's one of the ways it's working now. It sounds good. Like, I mean, I could persuade you. We're only going to accept something that comes directly from Joseph. It's, oh yeah, that sounds good. Until you realize he only wrote 20% of his own journal. He has scribes writing his own journal. And rules like that just rule out mostly everything. So yeah, that's a brief version of what's going on in that space right now.
Just to piggyback on that, I have several friends that have bought into that. And I just to dismiss us easily categorizing people. These are well-educated people that have bought into this. One of them is a friend of mine, Michelle Stone, has done 132 podcasts. She spent over a year digging deep and interviewing church historians, Brian Hales and Patrick Mason, all kinds of people. I love her dearly. I don't agree with her, but so I guess I'm pointing out that people we probably all have some interesting different beliefs, but we can still love each other. We can still hold relationship with each other. And I think it's unhelpful if we, denigrate them and use words in ways that just because they don't agree with us or believe what we think is a conspiracy. I mean, I don't agree with that conspiracy theory, but I love and respect much about these people, and I can do that without dismissing them out of hand. And I think that would help politically and religiously if we try to do that with people who don't agree with us, and that we do kind of think it's really crazy. There was a time where I thought things about gay people that I think now I thought really crazy stuff, and I wish I hadn't, but I did at the time, and it didn't make me a horribly stupid monster person. it made me uninformed and inexperienced. So I think, you know, the way forward is as much as we can to love people wherever they are, and whatever they. Anyway, that's my little speech there. I have a little quick question from Dan here. He says, what are the major disinformation campaigns that we should be aware of in our society today?
Wow, that's
That's a big one.
one.
Maybe pick one of your most concerning ones.
I mean, most of what we hear about politics right now is from a disinformation perspective. I think you have to work really hard. And I learned that. I mean, my personal experience was, you know, I would go sit in the hearings of the State Board of Education, and then I would read what was published in the reporting, and so you have to work really hard, but that's the challenge. I can't go to every government hearing. I was there because I was called to testify or whatever, it was part of my work. But I can't do that for every single issue. And so, but that's always going on. And so one of the things I could have done in that issue, I guess maybe I'm just trying to illustrate how you would find this. You know, I watched the 20 reporters who were always assigned by the big newspapers. Then I would watch the international and the national newspapers come in and cherry pick things. But I could, as someone who was part of the hearings and witnessed them, I could tell you the two journalists who were actually trying and got it right and understood the issues and were writing. But the problem was there were 200 journalists writing about it. And so my only takeaway is just this real sense of, you know, that's something I would ask an expert if you're on an issue, you know, who is the informed writer about this? Because I can't go to every meeting in Washington and every meeting of the Fed. How do I know who are good sources? And so I think that needs to become part of what we're asking. But I would, in terms of, you know, danger and concern, I think that the political misinformation just has the greatest potential for causing chaos.
And wouldn't you say it's on both sides? I mean, I see it on both sides when I read.
So here's where
European news.
Here's where I would critique what you just said. I think saying both sides is part of the script because there are more than two sides.
That's a good point.
And what happens, a journalist will say, oh, we're going to hear from both sides. And then you end up putting good information with a total idiot, just babbling all kinds of conspiracy, crazy stuff. But the journalist is patting himself on the back. We heard from both sides today. Now, you heard from an idiot and one informed person, and there are 10 angles to this issue. I need to hear about the other 9 before I really understand what's going on. But that script just keeps structuring it. So I always avoid somebody who says the left, the right, if that's the subject of their sentence. I know they don't care about what's really happening. They're both sides is another code word. And so you want to listen to people who get past that script and try and talk about the issues. And the issues are complicated. That's one of the reasons why we use a script, because we just can't absorb all the complexity of it's exhausting if we had but we've also in our culture, we've really denigrated experts. And this is, you know, like 60 years in the making. This isn't just the current news cycle. We've spent a long time dismantling the idea that somebody has expertise and promoting the idea that I've got a microphone in my basement and hours to spend. And so I'm going to talk about this thing. We did it. Talk radio was part of this. I mean, anybody who's talking 8 hours a day, there's no time to learn stuff. They're just talking. And so, but there's been a long trajectory and I think part of it is we have to start to learn, well, if I can't know everything, because I can't, how can I identify where to go to learn something?
So one organization is All Sides. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that particular one.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
collects a lot of from left to right and everything in between. And then they have editors that kind of rate, how conservative or liberal they are, and you can kind of get a good wide spread.
Yeah, I usually prefer
Quizzed again.
All
all
sides.
sides. I usually prefer analyses. I mean, we have, the spectrum idea is good. I often look for analysts who will try and complicate it and maybe even make it more like a grid or a 3D, recognizing that it isn't just a linear, you're more extreme than them, because you may be pulling it, your extremity, you're both conservative or liberal, but your extremity is pulling it this way, their extremity is pulling it that way.
So who are you looking at because there wouldn't be one source. You can't go to. one
No,
source.
you can't.
So who are, there's a question here, who are you looking?
I
It gives you a balance.
on whatever issue I'm interested in, I'll try and read widely. And I'll read international, because sometimes international people will see through stupid stuff that we don't see, because we're right in the middle of it. So sometimes that's helpful, but then you got to be aware they have their own, world that they're in and writing to. So yeah, my best advice is to read a lot of and it'll shift, in one topic, you may find, a couple of news sources that are pretty good, and the other topic, those trusted sources are bad at that topic, because it's just not. And it often comes down to individual journalists, not even the organization. You found out, oh, this guy has been tracking this issue for 40 years. And they're writing with experience and background and insight, and that's his only beat. He only writes about that. The other writer has 10 things they write about. You're like, well, okay, they're probably digesting things, and they've been a writer for 5 years, and they have 10 beats. You're like, well, maybe that person doesn't know as much about the topic. But there's been a hand way in the back for a long time.
So the topic of tonight was, the title.
I don't know what the topic was. It's whatever you want.
It's very, that's about
Great.
how to
That was our marketing people who made the title. Good job.
discern.
How to discern, yeah.
And so, and actually you have said some things about that, but as a regular working family person, don't have time really to do what
Yeah,
I'm hearing you say,
Sure.
which is quite a lot of investigative background, researching. So for just a regular person that is just trying to manage the information and trying to make good decisions about whether it's what's coming out in healthcare, whether it's education or politics, do you have some kind of basic kinds of things that could help more of a lay person
Yeah.
to sort of determine, or at least have a better sense of what out there is fake and what should I be taking in and making decisions based?
yeah, I have some ideas and some strategies. I don't have like the silver bullet. I don't have like a quick one. Did you want to add to this question, or?
This is something I kind of teach at BYU, so.
Well, you should answer.
I would just suggest that you,
Speak real loud so they.
I would just suggest that you Google the concept of lateral reading. It's very simple. And it's not, it doesn't take a long time. It involves kind of checking on the reputation of the institutions where the information is coming from. And it can really help you. It involves leaving that article. Don't think about that article as does it make sense, because they will, they'll be illogical, right? They'll be rhetorically sound. But leave that article and start looking into where it came from and what might be the motivations of that institution, person, or group. If you just Google lateral reading, I bet you'd find that helpful.
I mean, you said something similar to
Yeah,
what she just
yeah.
said. It just sounds incredibly labor intensive.
Yeah, so
It is.
here are, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we
here's
gotta
some,
find a way through that so that we can make better policy decisions, because Most of us do not have time to, I mean, I'm gonna look at this,
Yeah.
what you said.
I mean,
lateral,
it's 19-year-olds, so
yeah.
we can judge a 19-year-old, it's not super hard.
I'm not saying.
She's not saying it's hard, she's saying it's time consuming.
No.
That's the issue. Time
Yeah.
consuming.
And since the fairness doctrine was done away with, media channels now, they have no obligation to speak fact or truth. And we don't, when I was growing up, it was 4 news stations. Now, whether they were correct or not in their positions, they didn't opine, they just reported the news, what happened.
Yeah, which was part of the way they self-represented.
Yeah, yeah.
But they still opined. I mean, the act of selection involves opinion and, which story you run.
Right.
But maybe, so here's where I would start for just some strategies. I think the first one is this one's kind of a depressing one, but the first one is that the default is it's probably misinformation. And I think if we just start with that default, and then we're just a little more, we start from a position of study rather than whatever. So then the second kind of general strategy I would say is you want to stop and think about something. And so all of the information environments are really designed and optimized for you to not stop. You're scrolling quickly. Social media designs quick interactions, a like, a share. It doesn't give you one thing and say, think about this for an hour. And so kind of information overload is what's happening and you're bombarded. And so, and it takes emotional work to say, I'm going to stop and I'm going to think about this thing. Another strategy that's kind of a set of maybe practices is to start to learn ways, some of the tactics of misinformation. This is kind of like if this was Harry Potter, this would be your defense against the dark arts class, right? And so, but the reason for this is you admit, okay, I don't know everything about everything, and there's probably misinformation there. So how can I at least know that if they're deceiving me a lot or a little? And I like a story in the Book of Mormon that tells this. There's an experience where a person from one of the groups has an interaction with the other, and the one faints, passes out. He's a king, and so his wife, the queen, who's not there, says, "What happened?" And all of her servants say, "Well, this other guy is really terrible, and the king is dead, and he's starting to decompose and stink." And but so the queen, she hears all of that. All of her advisors, all of the people in the room are saying, "This guy did it. The king is dead, and his body's decomposing." So she goes to the guy. His name is Ammon in the Book of Mormon. This is in the Book of Alma. And she goes in and says, "All right, I wasn't there. My servants told me this is what happened, but what happened?" And then she says to him, "My servants say he's dead and he stinks, but to me he doth not stink." And I think that's and then Ammon,
The smell test.
this is the smell test. Ammon says, "You're right. He's not dead. He'll come back tomorrow." She's, "Okay, I'll trust you." And he comes back the next day. And so she's not in the room. She's not the expert. She's not a medical professional. But she's going off of something, and she's going off of, well, it doesn't smell. And I'm getting other opinions, and I'm going to go with this one. And Ammon says, "Tomorrow he'll be here." So she doesn't commit her life to it. She says, "Okay, I'll take that. Let's test it. Tomorrow, we'll see. If he revives tomorrow, then I trust you. If not, then I'm going to figure something out." And so some of the common, so there's one way that this happens. I actually studied this for several years. This is just me. I found it not very helpful. It may be more helpful in your BYU classes. There's this whole genre of rhetoric and rhetorical fallacies. And the problem is they get so buried in discourse, they're hard to find. And they'll make, their charts and you can memorize them. And you're running around, you're like, well, where's Ergo Proctor Hawk? I don't know where to find that. And so I found that memorizing all the historical fallacies is less helpful than maybe a few other tactics. One is we've named, is the either or. If they are really aggressive, this or that, you've got to decide right now, it's their team or our time, our team, it's life or death, and they're hiding something. I don't know what they're hiding, but if that's the way they're pushing it in a really stark binary, that's a smell test that just says something isn't right, and I'm going to have to dig deeper to know what they're hiding. Another one is when they really trumpet the facts. Let the facts speak for themselves. Here are the facts. Here are the facts. Facts never speak for themselves. Facts are chosen by people. Facts are gathered from places. There are choices on how you gather those facts. There are choices on which ones you present. I present only the ones that fit. But when somebody is really making a lot of noise about the facts and the facts speaking for themselves, they're hiding something. I don't know what they're hiding. And I may not even know the discipline, but this is just a sign that they're covering up something. Let's see, what are some other ones? I guess another one here is just the use of evidence, the way they use evidence. You may not know the evidence, but are they citing evidence? Are they pointing to sources? Are they pointing to sources that are publicly available and you can check? Doesn't mean you check them. May not even mean you understand them if you go read this economic journal about whatever. But are they at least, giving you the clues of here's where it's from, here's the network of information. And if they're not using evidence, then you do get into some of the rhetorical side. What are they appealing to? Well, they're appealing to a power, to, so-and-so said this, or to emotion, or they may be appealing to like the slippery slope. Well, something bad and fear, something worse is going to happen. Those aren't evidence-based, and you may not be able to pin down what they're doing, but you can at least say, oh, they're not really showing me any evidence or anything that I can check. So, and then the last one. So we started with the default assumption that there's misinformation mixed in, and I should go back. That sounds a little discouraging. Most of the time, people don't know that misinformation is mixed in. They're often 5 steps removed from the thing, and where I encounter it in church sources, it's often somebody will say, look at this TikTok. This is so damning. And what they didn't know is the TikTok creator was looking at a podcast and then made a TikTok. And the podcaster was interviewing a person who didn't know very much. And the person was citing an anti-Mormon book from the 1880s. But they're citing it as, here's a really old book from the 19th century. Well, that's true, but the 1880s is 40 years after the 1840s, so it's not really a good source on Joseph Smith in the 1840s. It's from, but the TikTok video doesn't tell you any of that. It's just this 30 seconds, really quick, snappy damning. You're like, whoa, I never knew that. I'm totally battered. But yeah, but if you trace where it came from, and the TikToker usually doesn't know all of that either. They've just kind of, and that's the way the internet likes to work that way. Repackage things, post things, make it your own. I mean, ever since Web 2. Yeah, they could be old. The internet 2.0 has been all about mashing it up, making it your own. And so the internet is just kind of filled with layers and layers of stuff. But I think the last one, then this one moves into, so yeah, we had the default, we had stop and think, we had learning the misinformation tactics. And then the last one would be learning some routines for checking information. And I say routine because discerning, to do a Latter-day Saint context, I think it's both. We have scripture that talks about it as a gift of the Spirit, a spiritual gift, something that can be enhanced because of your relationship with God. I believe that. I also believe that discernment is a skill, like riding a bicycle. It's something you can practice and you can get better. And so just like athletes will train and train and train so that they have muscle memory to, you shoot 1,000 free throws every week. Then at the end of the game, when you're really tired and you're down by one, you just want to be able to do it out of a reflex, out of a routine. And so I think cultivating the strategy is, how do I cultivate some routines for checking information so that it's a reflex? I don't always have to think, is this real or not, but it's a reflex. And so lateral reading is a routine that you can create and you can train, and it just becomes your default. I never just look at a website. In lateral reading, the best practice would be open a bunch of other browser windows and then start searching. Who's the creator of the site? Who's the host of the site? There are sites where you can go and see who owns the website. You can see who links to the website, who posts the website. And the lateral reading is looking at all around that context. But that can be a routine. It can be a reflex. It can be, I never just read a website. I always read the context around it. And so Real versus Rumor tried to teach some routines. That was kind of the way it was going. I think there are others. Asking for evidence is a routine. I think a simple routine can be working with what we know. And so 3 questions: what do we know? What don't we know? And how do we know what we know? And so if somebody's not telling you what we don't know, they're only pushing so that's a reflex. Wait, because there's always stuff we don't know. So, and then how do we know what we know? Okay, I'm pushing this thing on. So how do I know? Can be, how do you know that? And evidence could be part of that. But so there's, to make it not so overwhelming, I think it has to become kind of a routine that you stop thinking about. But it does mean you have to think about it for a while to make it a routine. Maybe the last one I would say is to come up to become part of a community that does this kind of work, and so that you can trust somebody in that community. And I'll give a tiny example. In my own household, I know nothing about health insurance. My wife does that. But she knows nothing about cars. I do that. But as a simple example of, we can't know everything about everything. And I would die if I had to be on the phone all day with insurance people. And she would die if she had to go sit at the mechanic. And I don't do stuff with cars. I go to mechanics. But as an example of a kind of a small scale economy, I can't know everything. And so can I find a group like Mormon Women for Ethical Government? And do I know them? Do I know people? Do I trust them? Well then, yeah, that will help me here. And can I find an expert? He writes at the Houston Chronicle. If you read him, you'll know what's going on in Texas education politics. And they may be a community that you know, or they just may be that once you get into space, you realize, oh, that's the expert who actually knows this thing. And because yeah, you can't know everything.
Are the fact checking websites?
Yes,
They're listed on the website. There's a whole bunch of them.
I put a link on there. They're good. I think you're always kind of evaluating them too, a kind of a lateral read on a fact checker. Fact checkers are almost always really negative on the thing they watch. So especially if they're watching politicians, there's one of my favorites is Quack Watch. It watches medicine for quack medicine, medical frauds, and so Snopes is one that's been around for a long time. They've gotten in trouble. Their leader has been active in political circles in recent years, and so people are starting to follow it. They presented themselves as objective. I think for the most part they are, but anyway, the fact checkers are people too, and they need to raise money, and that money has consequences. And so I think you just take the same kind of scrutiny of them and as you do it. What else have you had? Yeah.
Oh, I kind of wanted to. This discussion has made me think how these issues are so deeply connected to our needs as human beings. For example, our fear of complexity and our need for validation, and conversely, our desire for certainty and
Yeah,
validation. And I feel the gospel teaches us, God gives us complexity so that
Yeah.
we can figure it out and find the most beautiful forms of simplicity. So to me, does the thing that I'm reading, does it bring out the best in me? Does it speak to what I know to be true about the human condition? That's another thing that I think we can ask ourselves.
yeah, it's a good test.
Mike is.
I want to go back to the comment you were commenting on. You know, as human beings, one of these made us successful, we're incredibly good at cooperation. And, you know, our ego likes to think we can be sort of rational, objective about it. The reality is, if you try to do that, you literally couldn't get out of bed. You have to outsource so much of the belief to trusted sources. And so I think there's this sort of balance between I identify with different communities that I want to trust. Kind of, you know, you're trusting say health insurance to trust the community. And so we have to find that. And then also let's still balance that with what is really, even if you're doing this full time, it's still an occasional rational intellectual exercise to say, I'm going to tear this issue apart, really understand the truth. And I think that's one of the challenges for this. You know, we just got back from Africa, spending time with, you know, the tough poverty. You come back to the US and see all the, you know, the wonderful, you know, benefits that we have. Yet you got the right screaming about, we got to make America great again. This is such a mess. You got the left, you know, shouting about how things are inequality and racism, you know, and a whole bunch of things are just ridiculous, you know, from a objective perspective. But we're all identifying with sort of different cross sections of those groups. And I think the challenge is like, yeah, I've got a curiosity to take that step back and say, I'm going to challenge this belief that I'm on my group, my identity. That's challenging with the ego, status in that community, but it's, I think, kind of part of the art of living and trying to live genuinely. So,
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that happens, one negative, when you're in a community, you drop your barriers. And so you are less suspicious is the negative word, or alert is
Don't
the
think
positive.
critically.
You don't think critically.
You're vulnerable.
And you become, yeah, so,
and you can't, I mean, that's why we're, that's sufficient. That's why we flourish as well.
yeah.
We become really good at that. And occasionally, it's always good.
Well, and social media has put us in groups, you know, in Latter-day Saint culture puts you in groups or awards or a mission and so these connections are places where, I mean, Utah is the fraud capital of the world. That's objective data, and many of those are run on, hey, on religious affinity, and so yeah, that's just gotta be aware always.
Well, I thought, Jack West, and Erekson, all of them, you know, so all good. It seems like we've got a little more interaction back thinking about some stuff, but still, it's about who's going to listen. If you get somebody who gives emotional testimonies about some wonder some obscure tribe, South America or Asia, and they talk about all these things they did to them, who are you going to listen to? Are you going to listen to that person, or to these people? Or are you going to listen to medical experts who says that there's no medical research about any of these claims? All every time they're going to go to I think that's sort of part of the insight. At the same time, I think many people have gotten used to just having so simple that we've got to rely on AI to tell us the story. And it comes down to, I think, few people are really interested in getting real facts of the case. It's all who will the jury will be. Who's the most credible, who's the most persuasive, the person who is completely off the rocker, completely ungrounded down. If that person has charisma, has the right rhetorical skills, and you said, people are all that. Those trial.
We got like a couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes, yeah.
You mentioned some great ways, wonderful strategies for improving our own discernment. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with people in our lives who have got these other narratives and not, or spreading rumors?
Yeah. Well, I'd
So
say,
repeat that question, and then just so you know, I did list about 6 different things you could read exactly on that. Because to me, that's the most important thing,
Yeah.
is how we relate to people, and particularly that we don't always assume we're the ones in the right, and that we know they're the ones that are all messed up and wrong.
yeah,
But there's some really good stuff I found on the website that will do that.
yeah. And we talked earlier about conspiracy theories, and that's a certain way of, I mean, a certain, you've got to approach those a little bit different than other kinds of errors. But I think generally, if you're really trying to help someone, it's got to start with that you love them, you care about them, they know that, they feel that, you're not belittling them, you're not judging them, because that if they perceive that, it's over. So then there are these other kinds of really annoying Christian virtues like patience and long suffering, and those aren't the favorite things that people.
So after that.
But sometimes it is just that. Sometimes it's waiting for the right time to talk about things. I think it's always in the right way. I don't think contention is ever a framework, and so if you, whenever that starts, you're not gonna. Online is almost never a venue for helping someone. This is on the structures online. You may meet someone online and then figure out some other way. You may talk via Zoom or something, but if you're just doing dueling posts in it's never gonna do it. But kind of, it's kind of old fashioned. There's a interpersonal. They know you care. They know you're patient, and they know you're humble. They know that you're learning. There's a con artist who wrote a little memoir, and one of the things I really liked that he said he could con anyone. That wasn't the problem. And his favorite person to con was the person who thought he couldn't be conned. And so if you're assuming, I've got it all and you can't, well, that's the first step. It's the easiest one. Yeah, good luck.
Real quick. I thank you for the questions, because most of them answered. I wanted to go back to education. How do we raise children and make them a little more immune to these things? And there's been some good answers to that. But my real question then following that is, does the church encourage that kind of gullibility by teaching you'll know the truth because of how you'll feel? And, that warm feeling is what tells you that that's the spirit. Does that set us up to be more gullible?
I think if you do it incorrectly, it does. So maybe we'll make this the last one. My employer will be happy. A little product placement. But I'll actually, but no, the joking aside, I talked about how for the last 5 years, we've been just answering people's questions, listening, talking, helping them. And that has translated into something in the church's gospel library app. And if you go in there, on the main landing, it's topics and questions. And then it used to be a list of topics in alphabetical order, but at the top, we've added these two things that come out of our experience. And the first one is called seeking answers to questions, and the second one is called helping others with questions. You click on each one, there's kind of 5 concepts in there. And so one of them is similar to what you were talking about, but we've described it differently. It says recognize that revelation is a process. So I think there's learning that we can understand how the spiritual part of discernment works better. It isn't just the oversimplified way you described it. There's another one here, consult reliable resources. So I can say there's written information, there are videos. If you look closely, they do have videos of experts that you may or may not trust. Can you tell? That's me. Yeah. So
I got my distance classes.
I'm in there. So we've got these ideas of working to understand the past, be patient with yourself and others, center your life on Jesus Christ. So anyway, we are trying to provide a more robust set of tools for seeking and helping and recognizing that there's more to it than just, sitting in a revival meeting and feeling the urge to stand and shout, but there's more.
You just
to it.
crying when I
So-
bear my testimony isn't gonna work. Anymore.
Yeah, we don't even have tears as one of the signs. But yeah, thank you all for being here. This has been a great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks to all of you for making a really good discussion. Appreciate it. One of the things I've learned is just be curious. Ask, how did you come to that belief? Why do you think that way? And be genuine about it. Not like, I want to prove you wrong. I've got my arguments, but just hear their story. And I found that very effective. And again, like Mike said, challenge your own in-group. We become echo chambers. And I find a lot of helpful information outside of my atheist friends, all kinds of places. It's just full of wonderful truths out there that have blessed my life, which is part of why I do this once a month, to try to investigate and understand and learn. I appreciate you going on that journey with me, all of you. Thank you. All right, we'll take a break. We'll be done.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do we have access to the recorded program?
It'll be on my website. Yeah, and so Jeff has that. Yeah, it's ThinkAgain-Life. ThinkAgain-FaithAgain.life. And I'll have it on hopefully pretty soon, in a week. All right. We survived.